This is a big win for the Department of Justice. Does it surprise you? What happens next now that they can continue using these classified documents?
It really doesn't surprise me because this ruling by Judge Cannon that the DOJ couldn't investigate what was going on with these classified documents was really kind of shocking. I mean, sources and methods, spies that we have in other countries, who knows what are affected by these records? And to say that the Department of Justice couldn't look at them was really a surprising ruling. So I think the appellate court decided that that this was the right way to go with it, and they left the rest pretty much alone.
The three-judge panel, the 11th Circuit, also really lambasted the prior judge, Judge Cannon. I just want to read what they said. They said the district court abused its discretion in exercising equitable jurisdiction here. Explain what that means and how unusual it is to have a rebuke like that.
It's very unusual to get a rebuke like that. And the reference to equity has to do with, lawyers call it injunctive relief, when a judge is ruling not that one side has won damages or that somebody has to go to jail, but that you have to do something affirmatively. And in this case, the affirmative thing was not look at classified documents when the U.S. government has every right to look at its own classified documents. Trump derived no right to do that just because he took them to Mar-a-Lago. And of course, his attorneys never even posited the argument with evidence that he had declassified those documents. So I think the appellate court was really disturbed by an egregious overreach by the district judge here and sort of slapped back that decision and said, no, Department of Justice can have the records.
Maggie, the former president received a string of favorable decisions related to the search of Mar-a-Lago from that district judge. Do you expect that he's going to try to appeal this to the Supreme Court? Or, I mean, there's also questions, I guess, about his legal representation because it's been criticized widely, even by other justices.
We don't know yet, Anderson, what their response is going to be, but certainly the former president's strategy in most of these litigations has been to try to drag it out. So I anticipate there's a strong possibility that they will try to appeal to a higher court and see how far this goes. You know, this hasn't been a great legal week for them. I know that some people around the former president yesterday were insisting that the special master hearing yesterday was not that bad and that the special master, Judge Ray Dearie, did not sound that skeptical. He did sound very skeptical. What it means in terms of what he's going to do remains to be seen. But this decision by this circuit, which is filled with a lot of Trump appointees on it, I think is just another setback. However, I will just stress Trump's desire is always to drag these things out, and dragging it out isn't necessarily something he's going to be upset about.
David, the 11th Circuit also wrote the former president suggested he declassify these documents, but directly stated, quote, plaintiff resisted providing any evidence that he had declassified any of these documents, unquote. What do you make of the fact the former president's legal team continues to refuse to provide any evidence of that claim?
Anderson, I make just what it looks like prima facie, right? If given the opportunity, if your lawyers can't produce it, then it didn't happen most likely, right? So I believe the judge said, you know, you can't have your cake and eat it too in this situation. You can't claim that it's been declassified, then not produce evidence of declassification. You can't just wave a magic wand in this instance. You need to produce documents. You produce the receipts showing that it was actually put in motion, and the classifying authority would declassify it, and there'd be actual documents evidencing that.
Paul, do you think the Supreme Court would take the case if the former president appealed it to them?
I don't think that they will, but you have a former president of the United States here. It's not an ordinary case. They could. There's also another option that we haven't discussed tonight. They could ask for what they call an en banc hearing. Remember, only 3 judges made this decision. You normally have the right to ask the entire 11th Circuit to hear the issue, and then you can go to the Supreme Court, or you can go directly to the Supreme Court. And I think Maggie's right that Trump delays, and he tries to over-litigate everything. So he might ask for the full en banc hearing because that would delay things even more.
Maggie, obviously this is not the only bad legal news the former president got today. What impact, if any, do you think this would have, or do you think it would have any decision on whether or not he would run again?
You mean the decision in New York?
In New York, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, Anderson, I think that you can look at this in 2 different ways. Number one, a lot of people who have talked to the former president say that they don't think that his heart seems to be in politics and running and campaigning the way it once was. That having been said, the second that he says that he is not running, he loses a lot of attention. He loses the same ability to fundraise politically, and he loses potentially, if he were to run, the protections that the office affords a sitting president in terms of investigations. I think all of that is something that he is aware of. I think that the people I've spoken to close to him were very relieved still, as they have been over and over, that there was no criminal charge related here. There was a criminal referral that was discussed, but this is a civil action, and I think that you're going to see them fight it on the same grounds that you have seen them fight a lot. I will say there were a couple of very new details related to Trump's financial habits in this filing, and there were, there were certainly a lot of descriptions that the Attorney General used of his practices. She put together a comprehensive filing. A lot of it, and that this is what the Trump folks are pointing to repeatedly, is stuff that has largely been known. The question is going to be whether it gets heard differently in a court this time.
David, do you think the former president would be more or less likely to run again, given all the news today and just the sheer volume of legal drama surrounding him?
Right. So if you stack them up, there's potentially 5 cases going on right now. Right. So you have the criminal suit by New York State against the Trump organization, which is ongoing. You have this civil suit now. You have the district attorney in Fulton County looking at the 2020 election. And you have the January 6th committee and Department of Justice looking at January 6th. Then you have the Mar-a-Lago incident with the classified. So there are 5 potential lawsuits going on. But Anderson, if the president doesn't run, then he can't claim that it's politically motivated. So, if he's the Republican candidate for the presidency, he can look at the New York Attorney General and say, look, this is, as Maggie said, this has all been well known and out in public for a long time that this all these claims against me inflating my value of my properties, and none of the, if you look, we look at this suit, none of the financials were certified. The organization didn't sign off. None of the accountants signed off on it. So if the bank relied on him, I'd be very surprised. But if the president's not a candidate, then he doesn't have that card to play. So I would say it makes him a little bit more likely to run.
Well, also, David, if he's not a candidate, he's he's a former president, but he's also just the guy in Mar-a-Lago, and a lot of the energy around him and the sense of being in the center of the storm dissipates, and you're just the guy in Mar-a-Lago who's still at the center of a legal storm, but without any of the kind of future potential out there.
Well, I agree with that, but don't underestimate, the Trump fan base, right? There's a great deal of people who are not going to stop following Donald Trump just because he's not the candidate. They'll wait and see who he's going to support, right? The notion of the former president as the kingmaker still remains very strong. But if he's not a candidate, then he can't claim he's being politically victimized,
right.
And that's what I think would be important.
David Urban, Maggie Haberman, Paul Callan.